The door shatters like my trust, jagged splinters raining down in this Dartmouth cage I once called home. He storms in, my stepfather, a retired Mountie, eyes blazing with venom, handcuffs swinging like a noose. "You're a liar," he bellows, voice slicing through the air, spitting accusations that burn deeper than I can bear. I'm in the middle of a classified CFB Halifax briefing, encrypted screens alive with generals, my military ID glaring from the desk. I'm commanding a national security op, but to him, I'm nothing, a fraud, a fake, a betrayal of his fragile ego. The injustice rips me apart, decades of blood, sweat, and sacrifice, erased by his sneer. He yanks my wrist, the cuffs biting into my skin, each click a stab to my soul. The pain is unbearable, a lifetime of being unseen, crushed under his judgment. I don't break. And he's about to face the truth he can't handle. My name is Claire MacDonald, and I'm a Major General in the Canadian Armed Forces, stationed at CFB Halifax, 38 years old, forged in the fire of a life that refused to let me stay small. I grew up in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, under the grey skies of the Maritimes, where the wind off the Halifax harbour carried dreams bigger than the 10-kilometre stretch of coastline I called home. My father, James MacDonald, was a pilot, his CF-18 roaring over the Atlantic until a training crash stole him from me when I was 9. I can still hear the scream of my mother, Eleanor MacDonald, collapsing in our living room, her hands clutching the dog tags the officer handed her. She was a nurse, tough as the granite cliffs of Peggy's Cove, working 12-hour shifts at the Halifax infirmary, but that day, something in her broke. For 2 years, it was just us, her quiet strength pulling us through, until Gordon Fraser walked into our lives. Gordon, a Royal Canadian Mounted Police officer, was Halifax's golden boy, all broad shoulders and commanding presence, the kind of man who made people snap to attention. He met Eleanor at a hospital fundraiser, and within a year, they were married at a small church in Cole Harbour. At 11, I thought he'd be the anchor we needed, someone to fix the creaky porch steps and fill the silence left by my dad. But Gordon didn't like questions. "Why can't women fly fighter jets?" I asked once, staring at a photo of my father's plane. He laughed, sharp and dismissive. "Stick to something realistic, Claire. Jets are for men who follow orders." His words cut deeper than I'd admit, but I buried them, fuel for a fire I didn't yet understand. I poured myself into school, math, science, cadets at 14, determined to prove him wrong. Eleanor cheered at my drill competitions, her tired eyes glowing with pride, but Gordon? He'd clap once, then mutter, "Don't get too big for your britches, kid." By 18, I was accepted to the Royal Military College in Kingston, 1,200 kilometers from home. Gordon didn't come to my graduation. "You sure you're not in over your head?" he asked, leaning back in his recliner, the RCMP badge on his shelf glinting like a challenge. I didn't answer. I left for Ontario, my dad's dog tags tucked in my pocket, and never looked back. By 26, I was coordinating logistics across NATO bases. By 30, I was briefing admirals on cyber defense strategies. Now, at 38, I lead classified ops that keep Canada safe. But to Gordon, I'm still the girl who dared to dream too big, the one he needs to put back in her place. "You're just pushing paper," he'd sneer at family dinners, his voice dripping with doubt. Eleanor would squeeze my hand under the table, but her silence spoke louder. I stopped telling them about my life, my promotions, my world. Because some truths are too heavy for those who'd rather break you than believe you. 6 weeks. That's all it was supposed to be. A burst pipe in my Halifax condo flooded the electrical system, forcing me to find a secure spot to run classified operations for CFB Halifax. My mother, Eleanor MacDonald, insisted I come back to her Dartmouth home, 5 kilometers across the harbour. "The guest room's empty," she said, her voice soft over the phone, like the lapping waves of the Atlantic. "Gordon's home most days, but he'll stay out of your way." I should have known better. Gordon Fraser, my stepfather, retired RCMP officer, didn't know how to stay out of anything. His need to control was as predictable as the fog rolling in off Peggy's Cove. But I agreed, thinking I could lock my door, set up my encrypted systems, and keep my world separate. I was wrong. I arrived on a chilly Monday morning, the air sharp with salt and pine. Eleanor greeted me at the door with a warm hug and a pot of maritime clam chowder simmering on the stove. Gordon was in the living room, slouched in his worn leather recliner, the CBC news droning about a storm brewing off the coast. He gave me a curt nod, his eyes flicking to the secure laptop case in my hand. "Still playing with fancy gadgets, eh?" he said, his maritime drawl thick with skepticism. I forced a smile and headed to the guest room, my old bedroom, still with its faded blue walls and the creaky floorboard by the closet. I installed a military-grade lock, set up my dual monitors, and activated the red indicator light for classified calls. Protocol was clear, no interruptions. Eleanor understood, knocking softly before entering with tea. Gordon didn't. By day 2, he was testing boundaries. During a secure briefing with Colonel Liam Bennett, I heard 3 sharp knocks. "Claire, you want coffee?" Gordon's voice was casual, but I caught the edge in it, like he was fishing for something. I muted my mic, called out, "I'm on a call, Gordon." No interruptions. Silence followed, but I felt his presence lingering outside the door, a shadow pacing the hardwood. On day 3, it escalated. I was reviewing encrypted satellite feeds when I saw his boots under the doorframe, unmoving, like a predator waiting for a misstep. When I stepped out for water, he was leaning against the kitchen counter, arms crossed. "Your mother says you're in logistics," he said, eyes narrowing. "Funny how logistics needs all this secrecy." "What's with the locked door, Claire? Hiding something?" I met his gaze, steady. "It's work, Gordon. National security. You know the drill." He snorted, turning away, but I saw the gears turning in his head. By the end of the first week, it wasn't just passive probing. I found my laptop lid slightly ajar, the security log showing an unauthorized access attempt. My heart sank, not from fear, but from the betrayal of being watched in my own mother's house. I changed my passcodes, added biometric locks, and moved my encrypted drives to a hidden safe. Eleanor noticed the tension. "He's just curious, Claire," she said, stirring her tea, her voice pleading for peace. "Curious people don't tamper with classified equipment," I replied, sharper than I meant. Her eyes dropped to her cup, and I hated how familiar that silence felt, her choosing harmony over truth, just like when I was a kid. Week 2 brought a darker shift. Gordon wasn't just observing, he was investigating. I found a notepad by the kitchen phone, scribbled with times and phrases. Tuesday, 14-minute call, mentioned secure assets twice. Another page had names, Colonel Liam Bennett, misspelled as Bennett, and Task Force Aurora, my operations codename, scrawled phonetically. He was using his old RCMP contacts to dig into my team, pulling strings he had no right to touch. I confronted him in the garage, where he was polishing his old service revolver. "Gordon, stop spying on my work," I said, voice low but firm. He didn't flinch, just smirked. "I'm not spying, Claire. I'm protecting this house. Someone's gotta make sure you're not playing soldier with secrets you shouldn't have." His words hit like a slap, but I held my ground. "This is beyond your jurisdiction," I said, walking away, my pulse hammering. That night, I overheard him on the phone, his voice low and urgent. "She's got this room locked up like a bunker. High-level lingo, encrypted tech. I'm telling you, something's not right." He was building a case, convincing himself I was a fraud, a threat to his authority. Eleanor stood in the hallway, wringing her hands, caught between us again. "Just talk to him, Claire," she whispered. "He'll listen." But I knew better. Gordon didn't want answers. He wanted control. And every day I spent in that house, I felt his net tightening, his suspicion coiling like the storms that batter Nova Scotia's shores. I tightened my own protocols, checked my systems twice, and slept with one eye open. Because I wasn't just protecting my mission. I was protecting myself from a man who'd rather break me than believe I'd outgrown him. The air in my mother's Dartmouth home grew heavier by the day, like the fog that blankets Halifax harbor in late fall. I'd been there 2 weeks, my encrypted systems humming in the guest room, each secure call to CFB Halifax a lifeline to the world I'd built, a world Gordon Fraser couldn't touch. But his shadow clung to me, his suspicions seeping through the walls like damp rot. I thought I could outlast him, keep my mission airtight, but I underestimated how far a man like him would go to prove he was right. The night of the family dinner, 12 days into my stay, was when the ground beneath me cracked open, exposing a wound I'd buried since I was a girl. Eleanor had insisted on a proper maritime supper, lobster rolls, coleslaw, her famous blueberry grunt for dessert. She'd invited Gordon's old RCMP buddy, Sergeant Tom Callahan, and his wife, Mary, to join us at the oak table in her dining room, overlooking the 5-kilometer stretch to downtown Halifax. I wore a plain sweater, my military ID tucked away, hoping for one evening of peace. But Gordon had other plans. As Eleanor passed the butter, he leaned back, his voice cutting through the clink of cutlery. "So, Claire," he said, loud enough for the whole table to hear, "still running your little secret club from the guest room? What's it this time, logistics for paper clips or some big-shot military game?" His smirk was a blade, and Tom chuckled, oblivious to the venom. I gripped my fork, forcing a smile. "It's work, Gordon. Same as always." He leaned forward, eyes glinting. "Work, eh? Funny how nobody's ever seen you in a real uniform. All I see is a laptop and a locked door. You expect us to believe you're some kind of general?" The room went still. Eleanor's hands froze on the serving dish, her eyes darting between us. Mary shifted uncomfortably, but Tom, egged on by Gordon's tone, chimed in. "Come on, Claire, spill it. What's with all the cloak and dagger stuff?" My chest tightened, not from their words, but from the silence that followed. Eleanor, my mother, the woman who'd bandaged my skinned knees and cheered at my cadet parades, said nothing. Her lips parted, but no sound came. That silence was a betrayal sharper than Gordon's words, a reminder of every time she'd chosen peace over me. I swallowed the ache and stood, my chair scraping the floor. "Excuse me," I said, voice steady but cold, and walked out. In the guest room, I locked the door, my hands trembling as I sank onto the bed. The pain wasn't new, it was the same wound Gordon had prodded since I was 11, the one that whispered I'd never be enough. But it wasn't his voice that broke me that night. It was Eleanor's absence. I opened the drawer by the bed, searching for a distraction, and found it, a yellowed envelope, tucked beneath old photos. My father's handwriting stared back at me, James MacDonald, his letters sharp and sure. To Claire, my fearless girl, it read. Inside was a note, written before his last flight. "You'll soar higher than my jet ever could. Don't let anyone clip your wings." The words hit like a tidal wave, pulling me under. I clutched the letter, tears burning my eyes, and let the grief spill out, not just for him, but for the mother who couldn't stand up for me, for the girl who'd fought alone to become Major General Claire MacDonald. I sat there, the Halifax skyline flickering through the window, 5 kilometers of water separating me from the life I'd built. The pain was raw, a chasm that swallowed every medal, every briefing, every sacrifice. I wasn't just unseen by Gordon, I was invisible to the woman who'd raised me. Eleanor's silence at that table wasn't just cowardice, it was a choice, one that echoed every time she'd let Gordon's doubts drown out my truth. I wiped my face, folded the letter, and tucked it into my pocket. The mission wasn't over. I had a job to do, a country to protect. But that night, I realized something colder than the Nova Scotia wind. The only person I could rely on was myself. Gordon's investigation was closing in, his notepad filling with half-truths. I didn't know how far he'd go, but I knew one thing. He was about to cross a line he couldn't uncross. And I'd be ready. The weight of my father's letter still burned in my pocket as I locked the guest room door in my mother's Dartmouth home, the Halifax skyline a faint glow 5 kilometers across the harbor. It was 0700 on a crisp Nova Scotia morning, the air sharp with the promise of a storm. I'd spent the night replaying Gordon Fraser's venomous words from the dinner table, my mother Eleanor MacDonald's silence cutting deeper than his mockery. But there was no time to dwell. A critical operation, Task Force Aurora, was greenlit, and I was leading it from this creaky old bedroom, my encrypted systems humming like the pulse of the nation I'd sworn to protect. At 0730, I received the secure briefing packet from CFB Halifax. By 0745, my monitors flickered to life, Colonel Liam Bennett's face anchoring the screen alongside 3 other senior officers. We were mid-briefing, mapping exfiltration routes across the Atlantic, when I felt it, a stillness outside my door, too deliberate, too heavy. I'd texted Eleanor earlier, going live. No interruptions. She'd replied with a thumbs-up emoji, her way of keeping the peace. But Gordon wasn't at his morning coffee run. I hadn't heard his truck leave the driveway, not even the crunch of gravel. My instinct screamed, but I kept my voice steady, outlining fallback protocols. At 0800 sharp, the secure channel locked in, live feed streaming from a naval vessel 200 kilometers off the coast. Liam updated on incoming weather threats, a squall moving in fast. 22 minutes into the call, a metallic click snapped my focus. The door handle turned slowly, testing the lock. I muted my mic, projecting calm. Secure call in progress. Do not enter. Silence. Then, a deafening crack. The door exploded inward, splinters scattering across the faded blue carpet. Gordon stood in the doorway, chest heaving, handcuffs gleaming, his old RCMP holster strapped to his hip. "You're done, Claire," he roared, voice thick with rage. "No more lies. Hands behind your back, now." My heart didn't race, it calculated. On the screen, Liam's jaw tightened, his hand moving off-screen. The other officers froze, their eyes locked on the chaos unfolding. Gordon stepped closer, his boots grinding wood into the floor. "You think you can fool me with your fancy tech and fake ranks," he spat, yanking my wrist. The cold steel of the cuffs bit into my skin, each click a mockery of everything I'd built. "You're no general. You're a fraud, playing dress-up in my house." Eleanor appeared in the hallway, her face pale, hands clutching her sweater. "Gordon, stop," she gasped, but he ignored her, his grip tightening. "I'm protecting this country from whatever scam you're running," he snarled, his voice shaking with conviction. I unmuted my mic, my voice cutting through the room like a blade. "Colonel Bennett, Protocol Aurora is now in effect." "Confirm." Liam's eyes narrowed, his response immediate. "Confirmed." Security response dispatched. The screen went black, connection severed. Gordon laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "What, your Zoom buddy's gonna save you? I've seen scams like this, stolen valor, fake badges. You're no soldier, Claire." I stood, slow and deliberate, the cuffs pinching but not breaking me. "You're assaulting a major general in a classified operation," I said, my voice low, unyielding. "Step back, Gordon. Now." He faltered, but his pride pushed him forward, snapping the second cuff. "You're under arrest until someone real sorts this out." Then, the air shifted. Engines roared outside, tires skidding on the quiet Dartmouth street. 5 black SUVs screeched to a halt, doors slamming in perfect sync. Eleanor bolted to the front door, Gordon shouting, "Don't open it." Too late. Tactical boots pounded the porch, and a commanding voice boomed, "Canadian Armed Forces. Open the door." The team filed in, 6 soldiers, weapons holstered but ready, led by a captain with eyes like steel. "Sir, step away from Major General Claire MacDonald immediately," he ordered. Gordon's face drained of color, his hands trembling. "No, that's impossible," he stammered. She's just a logistics clerk." The captain's voice didn't waver. "You've restrained the Deputy Commander of National Security Operations. Release her. Now." Eleanor gasped, her hands covering her mouth, as the truth she'd never seen crashed over her. Gordon fumbled with the cuffs, his world crumbling under the weight of his mistake. The Dartmouth street outside my mother's house fell silent as the black SUVs roared away, their taillights fading into the fog rolling off Halifax Harbor, 5 kilometers distant. The cuffs were off my wrists, but the sting of Gordon Fraser's betrayal lingered, sharp as the Nova Scotia wind cutting through the pines. I stood in the splintered doorway of the guest room, Eleanor MacDonald trembling behind me, her eyes wide with a truth she'd never faced. The Canadian Armed Forces team had escorted Gordon to CFB Halifax, 10 kilometers away, for immediate questioning. He'd crossed a line, assaulting a major general, disrupting a classified operation, Task Force Aurora. But this wasn't over. Gordon's pride, his need to be the one in control, had driven him too far, and now he'd face the consequences of his own making. I wasn't just Claire MacDonald, the girl he'd dismissed for decades. I was a commander, and I'd see this through. At CFB Halifax, they held Gordon in a stark interrogation room, its concrete walls as cold as the Atlantic in February. I walked in at 0900, my uniform crisp, my father's dog tags tucked beneath my collar, a silent reminder of who I'd fought to become. Gordon sat across the steel table, his broad shoulders slumped, the RCMP swagger gone. His hands fidgeted, red marks circling his wrists where his own cuffs had briefly sat, an irony he couldn't escape. Colonel Liam Bennett stood by the door, his presence a steady anchor, his tablet glowing with logs of Gordon's unauthorized RCMP database queries. "You've been busy, Mr. Fraser," Liam said, his voice clipped, professional. "Accessing classified personnel files, running checks on my team, calling old mounted contacts to dig into Major General MacDonald's record. That's a federal offense." Gordon's eyes darted to me, dull but defiant. "I was doing my job," he muttered. "Protecting my community. She's no general, she's a girl from Dartmouth who got too big for her boots." His words were a fading echo of the man who'd mocked me at dinner, but they still burned. I leaned forward, my voice low, unyielding. "You didn't protect anything, Gordon. You saw a woman who outranked you, and it scared you. You couldn't stand that I didn't need your approval." He flinched, but his jaw tightened. "I saw those messages, Task Force Aurora, secure assets. Nobody verified your rank, Claire. You're hiding something, and I'm not the only one who thinks so." Liam stepped forward, his tablet screen flashing red. "You used RCMP systems to track her calls, didn't you? Pulled strings with a contact in Ottawa, accessed restricted files. That's not suspicion, Mr. Fraser. That's illegal." Gordon's face paled, his hands gripping the table. "I thought she was a fraud," he stammered. "I was trying to protect Eleanor, protect Canada." The lie was desperate, a crumbling facade. I stood, my shadow falling across him. "You weren't protecting Canada. You were protecting your ego. You saw my locked door, my encrypted systems, and you couldn't handle a world where I had power you'd never touch." My voice cracked, not with weakness, but with the weight of years spent proving myself to a man who'd never see me. Eleanor waited outside, her hands twisting the hem of her sweater, her face etched with guilt. I'd asked for her to be kept separate, to spare her the sight of Gordon's fall. But I couldn't shield her from the truth any longer. "Claire," she whispered as I stepped into the hallway, "did he really do this?" I nodded, my throat tight. "He broke federal law, Mom. He thought he was catching a criminal, but he was the one crossing lines." Her eyes filled with tears, not for Gordon, but for the daughter she'd failed to defend. I wanted to comfort her, but the mission came first. I requested internal processing for Gordon, not to protect him, but to keep Eleanor from the public fallout. His RCMP credentials would be revoked, his name flagged in every government database from Halifax to Vancouver. He'd never wear a badge again. Back in the interrogation room, Gordon looked up, his voice barely a whisper. "Why didn't you just tell me what you did?" For the first time, there was no anger, only defeat. I met his gaze, unflinching. "I didn't owe you an explanation, Gordon. You owed me trust." He looked away, the weight of his choices settling like the tides of the Bay of Fundy. I walked out, the door closing with a finality that echoed louder than his accusations. Gordon Fraser had tried to cage me, but he'd only caged himself. And I, Claire MacDonald, was still standing, ready to face whatever came next. The interrogation room door at CFB Halifax slammed shut behind me, its echo as final as the end of Gordon Fraser's reign over my life. The 10-kilometer drive back to Dartmouth felt longer, the Halifax harbor a dark mirror reflecting the storm inside me. Gordon, my stepfather, had crumbled under the weight of his own hubris, his unauthorized RCMP queries exposed, his assault on me, Major General Claire MacDonald, branded a federal offense. But the victory was hollow. Eleanor MacDonald, my mother, waited in a small waiting area at the base, her hands clutching a tissue, her eyes red from tears she hadn't shed in my presence since I was 9. The truth had shattered her world as much as it had Gordon's, and I knew the hardest conversation was still ahead. I wasn't just fighting for my rank or my mission. I was fighting for the right to be seen, not as a daughter, but as the woman I'd become. At 1100, I sat across from Colonel Liam Bennett in a secure office overlooking the naval docks, where ships bobbed like silent sentinels under the Nova Scotia sky. He slid a report across the desk. Gordon's charges were formal, unlawful detainment, misuse of RCMP systems, interference with a classified operation. "He's done, Claire," Liam said, his voice steady but heavy. "His credentials are revoked. He'll never work in law enforcement again. The board's pushing for civilian charges, but you can request internal handling." I nodded, my jaw tight. "Internal processing," I said. "Not for him. For Mom." Liam's eyes softened, understanding the weight of my choice. Gordon's fall would be quiet, confined to military channels, to shield Eleanor from the public disgrace of her husband's actions. But it didn't erase the cost. Every choice I made to protect her felt like another piece of myself I'd buried long ago. I found Eleanor in the waiting area, her sweater frayed at the cuffs, her face a map of regret. She stood as I approached, her voice barely above a whisper. "Claire, is it true? All of it, your rank, your work?" I nodded, my father's dog tags pressing against my chest. "I've been a major general for 2 years, Mom. I lead operations that keep this country safe." Her breath caught, and she sank back into the chair. "I didn't know," she said, her voice breaking. "I thought you were just traveling, working logistics. Why didn't you tell me?" The question stung, not because it was new, but because it echoed Gordon's accusations. "I couldn't," I said, my voice low but firm. "Classified means classified. You saw the red light on my door, the protocols. But you chose to believe Gordon's doubts instead of me." Her tears fell now, silent but heavy, like the rain that pounds Peggy's Cove in autumn. "I let him talk that way," she said, her hands twisting the tissue into knots. "At dinner, all those years, I let him diminish you. I thought it kept the peace." I knelt beside her, the cold tile biting through my uniform. "It wasn't peace, Mom. It was silence. And it cost us both." She reached for my hand, her fingers trembling, and for the first time, I saw her not as the nurse who'd raised me, but as a woman trapped by her own choices. "I'm so sorry, Claire," she whispered. "I should have fought for you." I squeezed her hand, the ache in my chest softening, not gone, but quieter. "You can start now," I said. "Not for him. For us." Back at the house, the splintered guest room door stood as a reminder of Gordon's betrayal, but I didn't linger. I packed my equipment, the encrypted drive secure, and drove to a temporary officer's quarters 8 kilometers away in Shearwater. Gordon would face a military tribunal, his name erased from the RCMP's legacy, his pride reduced to a footnote in a classified report. I didn't need to see him punished. His own actions had done that. But Eleanor's words stayed with me, a fragile bridge to something new. She'd seen me, finally, not the girl who left Dartmouth for Kingston, but the woman who commanded rooms and carried a nation's trust. The Maritime's wind howled outside, but for the first time in weeks, I felt steady. Gordon had tried to break me, but he'd only broken himself. And I, Claire MacDonald, was ready to rebuild what he'd tried to destroy. The sun dipped low over Halifax harbor, casting a golden glow across the 5-kilometer stretch of water that separated my mother's Dartmouth home from the city I'd sworn to protect. I stood in temporary officers' quarters in Shearwater, 8 kilometers from the splintered door Gordon Fraser had left behind. His fall was complete, his RCMP credentials stripped, his name a shadow in a classified report at CFB Halifax. But the weight of that victory didn't lift the ache in my chest. Eleanor MacDonald, my mother, had seen me as Major General Claire MacDonald for the first time, but the years of silence between us lingered like the fog over Peggy's Cove. I wasn't ready to forgive, not yet, but I wanted to build something new, a relationship not built on Gordon's terms, but on truth. A week after the incident, Eleanor arrived at CFB Halifax for a formal ceremony honoring Task Force Aurora's success. I'd invited her, a small gesture to bridge the gap. She stood at the back of the parade square, her navy coat blending into the crowd, but her eyes locked on me as I addressed the troops. The wind whipped across the base, carrying the salt of the Atlantic, and for a moment, I saw the woman who'd cheered at my cadet parades, not the one who'd stayed silent under Gordon's shadow. After the ceremony, she approached, her steps hesitant, her hands clutching a small photo frame. "Claire," she said, her voice trembling, "this is for you." She handed me the frame, a picture of me at 16, standing proud at a science fair with a model jet, my father's dog tags around my neck. I kept it hidden, she admitted, her eyes glistening. Gordon never liked it. But I should have shown the world. I took the frame, my throat tight. "You see me now, Mom," I said, my voice soft but steady. "That's what matters." She nodded, tears spilling over. "I was wrong to let him define you. You're not just my daughter, you're a leader, Claire. You always were." Her words were a lifeline, fragile but real, pulling us towards something honest. We stood there, the Halifax skyline shimmering in the distance, and I felt the first cracks in the wall between us begin to heal. It wasn't forgiveness, not fully, but it was a start, a promise to rebuild on our own terms, not his. That moment crystallized a truth I'd carried since I left Dartmouth for Kingston, 1,200 kilometers away. Strength doesn't come from shouting or proving others wrong. It comes from standing tall, even when they try to shrink you. Gordon thought he could cage me with doubt, but I'd built a life bigger than his narrow vision. To every woman told she's too much, too loud, too ambitious, know this, your power doesn't need their permission. It never did. I looked out at the young recruits on the parade square, their boots gleaming under the maritime sun, and saw myself at 18, carrying my father's dream. I didn't need Gordon's approval to soar. I needed my own. Eleanor hugged me before she left, her embrace tighter than it had been in years. "I'm proud of you, Claire," she whispered. "Not just for what you do, but for who you are." I nodded, the weight of her words settling like the tides of the Bay of Fundy. As she walked away, I stood alone, the photo frame in my hands, a reminder that the girl who dreamed of jets had become a woman who commanded them. The fight wasn't over, not for me, not for anyone who's ever been doubted. But I was ready to keep going, to lead, to build, and to never let anyone clip my wings again. The Nova Scotia sun hung low over CFB Halifax, its light glinting off the Atlantic, 5 kilometers from the Dartmouth home where I'd faced Gordon Fraser's handcuffs and my mother's silence. I stood on the parade square, the photo frame from Eleanor MacDonald still warm in my hands, a snapshot of the girl I'd been, dreaming of jets under my father's dog tags. That girl became Major General Claire MacDonald, not because anyone gave me permission, but because I refused to let doubt define me. Gordon tried to cage me, to shrink me into the box he'd built. He failed. But this isn't just my story. It's for every woman who's been told she's too much, too bold, too driven. It's for every soul who's carried a dream heavier than the Bay of Fundy's tides, only to be told it's out of reach. Your strength doesn't need their approval. It never did. Here's what I've learned, standing on this windswept base, 10 kilometers from the wreckage of my past. First, believe in your own worth. No one, not a stepfather, not a skeptic, gets to decide what you're capable of. Your actions, your grit, your heart, they speak louder than their words. Second, rise above pain. The scars from Gordon's doubt, from Eleanor's silence, don't vanish, but they don't own you. You can build something stronger from them. Third, choose who you let in. Surround yourself with those who see your light, not those who dim it. My father, James MacDonald, saw it. Eleanor is learning to. And I hope you will, too. I'm still here, leading recruits under the maritime sky, carrying a mission bigger than one man's ego. If this story touched you, if it stirred something deep, share it. Drop a comment on True North Courage, tell me who tried to clip your wings and how you soared anyway. Hit that like button if you believe in standing tall. And subscribe to True North Courage, because we're not done telling stories that matter. Your voice, your truth, it's worth hearing. Let's keep building, together, under the vast Canadian sky.